Good evening, everyone. I call the Monday, March 9, 2020 work session of Portsmouth City Council to order. And Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Glover? Mrs. Lucasberg?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Mayor Rowe?
Here. And I'll ask everybody to silence the ringer of their cell phones, please. And if you feel the need to talk, please go in the lobby. Thank you. Dr. Patton?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. The first presentation this evening, City Attorney Solomon H. Ashby Jr. will provide an update on the city jail. The second presentation, benchmarking fees and rates, Mrs. Gloria Washington, Budget Officer, will provide a review of local fees and benchmarking data comparisons based on our peer localities across Hampton Roads. This information provides the framework for the continual evaluation of the city's revenue for the budget development process. This practice, as recommended by the GFOA, the General Finance Officers Association, is outlined in the city's financial policies concerning the development of revenues each year. Mrs. Rosalind Oglesby, Assistant City Manager, will take a closer look at the comparisons of the local meal tax and the impact of increasing the meals tax if proposed in the FY 2021 budget. The final presentation, Capital Improvement Program highlights. This presentation will highlight the proposed FY 2021 Capital Improvement Program. A capital improvement plan, or CIP as it's commonly known, is a short-range plan for over a 5-year period which identifies capital projects and equipment purchases, providing a planning schedule and identifies options for financing the plan. The City of Portsmouth Capital Improvement Program supports projects that improve the infrastructure and economic development needs of the City of Portsmouth and Portsmouth Public Schools. The CIP developed annually is an opportunity to define needs, set priorities, plan funding, and protect the financial sustainability of the city. Mr. Trey Burke, Budget Officer, will make the presentation. City Attorney Ashby.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council. I come before you today to provide you the status of the pending litigation and the city's posture as it pertains to the Civic Center Jail here in the City of Portsmouth. The City of Portsmouth stands at a juncture where it must determine how it can best address the current and future challenges of the city. Can the city forego a 20-year City Council-approved jail facility paid for within the city's debt capacity policy and its debt capacity availability? And can the city forego its current vision for the future of Portsmouth, where it may be tasked with authorizing a double-digit multi-year tax increase or violation of the city's debt policy? Today, I will go through a number of issues that has been brought about with regard to the litigation and the status of the Civic Center Jail. And let me begin by saying from 2019, December of 2019 to today, the City of Portsmouth has assessed and reassessed its legal liability as it pertains to the Portsmouth Civic Center Jail. Given the current circumstances, we have assessed and evaluated the financial posture of the city and the issues surrounding the financial structure of the city and the requirements in order to conform with current court orders and the conditions present at the Civic Center Jail. Today, I will provide you an assessment of the path forward for the future of the city of Portsmouth, its city council, and its residents. Let me start by first doing a bit of a review of the beginnings. In early 2019, you may recall that the City Council received several presentations concerning the operation of the Civic Center Jail, as well as a presentation as it relates to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. At the conclusion of the presentations by the sheriff and the superintendent, City Council requested an assessment of the Civic Center Jail. There were three assessments made at that period of time. One was done by PACE Collaborative, where they evaluated the electrical, mechanical, and the HVAC system. A second assessment was done by Clark Nixon, which evaluated the structural condition of the Civic Center and the Civic Center Jail. And Applied Laboratory Services did assessment in terms of asbestos issues and asbestos abatement issues. Let me go in a little bit depth with regard to what were the salient points with regard to those assessments that were made. As it pertains to PACE Collaborative, you see here a page out of the PACE Collaborative report. PACE Collaborative identified immediate needs costing in terms of construction and repairs approximately $770,000. With regard to continued use of the building, PACE Collaborative identified an additional $14.58 million in construction costs and roughly $3.58 million in design fees and contingencies in order to make the necessary repairs at the Civic Center in order to preclude both water intrusion, which challenges and puts at risk the HVAC system, which is located in the basement of that facility. So PACE Collaborative's collective assessment and cost in terms of required repairs was approximately $18.16 million. And that was the electrical piece. With regard to Clark Nixon and the structural issues, Clark Nixon identified $4.36 million in immediate repairs needed to repair the moisture and thermal protection of the facility and to repair the concrete slabs and pads that surround that facility. In terms of long-term additional repairs, Clark Nixon identified $36.42 million for additional structural repairs. In the Clark Nixon report, there was a breakdown in terms of those needed repairs. They were addressed as it relates to particular buildings, and so for the purposes of this discussion, we focus on some but not all of the requested repairs. As it relates to the plaza level, Clark Nixon identified a need of about $6.4 million in repairs. As it relates to the jail, the cost estimate for repairs was $8.67 million. As it relates to the garage, the repair costs were approximately $7.06 million for a total of $22.15 million. The next two slides provide a portion of the Applied Laboratory Services report and assessment. Within that report, there are several areas where Applied Laboratory Services identified asbestos in the jail facility, in the garage facility, which is common to all of the buildings over at the Civic Center. But of the cost proposed by Applied Laboratory Services, there was a repair cost of about $2.3 million. The vast majority of that did not concern the garage or the jail.
So that's 2.3 for asbestos abatement only?
Correct. You all will recall that once those reports were obtained by the city proceeded to seek the condemnation of the Civic Center jail and the properties thereabout. It should also be noted, we did have litigation, and that's where it began with regard to the condemnation of the Civic Center jail. Subsequently, the sheriff also filed an action in order to obtain repairs, and he added to his complaints the same 3 reports as part of his complaints and his request to have repairs made over at the facility. So as we sit here today, the city of Portsmouth is party to 4 civil actions seeking to address the future of the Civic Center jail. We have had a hearing and a ruling from the court, Portsmouth Circuit Court, on 2 of the 4 civil actions. And as part of that ruling, part of that order, the Circuit Court did in fact deny the Civic Center condemnation. And they also instructed the court, and this is a quote from the order, the city is ordered to maintain the Portsmouth City Jail in a manner that is secure and adequate for housing inmates so long as the facility is used as a jail by the city. That is what the city has done from the time period even before this issue occurred. As issues have come up, we have proceeded to have those issues addressed throughout the life of this litigation. It should also be noted that throughout this litigation, of course, as would be expected, the sheriff has taken some challenge to the reports that the city put forward, even though he appended those to his own action in terms of trying to get particular repairs done. But in different areas, he has disputed whether or not the conditions are as the city's reports state. And on some occasions, the assertions on behalf of the sheriff have not been accurate. For instance, in August of 2019, the sheriff submitted and his expert testified based on this report here that with proper maintenance, the boilers in the Civic Center should last another 10 to 15 years before a replacement is required. Again, that was the testimony in the court in August of 2019. The main boiler for the Civic Center failed on February 7th, 2020. When that occurred, we notified the sheriff's office. We proceeded to get assessments done in terms of getting those that boiler put back in place due to the orders we were under by the court. We have an estimate of about $130,000 to $145,000 to replace the primary boiler for that facility.
And that boiler is located in the basement, is that its location?
It is below grade level of the basement in the Civic Center. So as you go into the garage of the Civic Center, the mechanical room actually sits lower than the parking surface in the garage.
What's the function of that boiler?
The boiler exists. It provides both hot water as well as heat generation in the facility. The way it was originally constructed, and give me a little latitude, the way it was originally constructed, it provided both heat and domestic hot water. And so when it failed, we had to go to the secondary system, which is holding up right now in terms of providing water, but also in the assessment of that facility and the discussions around repairing that boiler. You know, the design there was circa 1972, as that whole building is built between 69 and 74 roughly. So there were 2 different types of boilers in order to serve all functions. And so some of the things we're having to do in terms of trying to stay in compliance with regard to the court's order is design a system that can meet the needs under current standards. You don't generally have a heat boiler and a domestic hot water boiler anymore. So we are addressing those issues while we're under the court's order. As you all know, the city and, well, let me start. The court order also addresses and directs both parties to continue discussions on any other pending matters. And the city has done so as the court ordered and as instructed by you all. We have had settlement discussions in alignment with city council sentiments. We have had settlement discussions in alignment with the fiscal realities that exist for the city, as well as with a mind towards the legal liabilities which need to be eliminated on behalf of the city of Portsmouth.
And when you talk about legal liability, you're talking about such things as personal injury.
Certainly, we are talking about both tort actions as well as civil rights actions for those residents in the Civic Center jail. So where are we as a city, and where do we sit and where do we stand today? There is a standing court order that requires the city to continue repairs without monetary limitation on that order. New construction and repair estimates, which range from about $31 million to $47 million, exceed the city's debt capacity. When we were in court, the debt capacity availability was about $5 million for the city. And so the city also, as we have said in different reports, you all received a report from Davenport, our financial advisors, as it relates to the jail earlier this year. In that report, and as well as in discussion and testimony in the court, it was said that the city pays about $16,000 a day, or approximately $5.6 million a year for the beds at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. At last report, the city was using 35 of its required 250-bed allocation. I'm aware, and I'm sure many of you are aware, that there have been a couple of public notices with regard to issues with the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. And as I mentioned to council previously, the issue with regard to the Board of Corrections has been addressed. Hampton Roads Regional Jail received this letter from the Board of Corrections, not the Department of Corrections, as it pertains to a administrative issue they had on reports to the Board of Corrections. And I was provided this letter in response from the Board of Corrections speaking to the issue being addressed. One of the issues identified in the reports done by the city has been an issue with regard to the fire protection system over at the Civic Center Jail. So one of the primary issues in terms of life safety has been the testing of the fire protection system in order to address both the city and city employees' liability under state law, which would be tort law, as well as civil rights law, which would be federal law. Some of that testing has been done. Some repairs have to be done, and some more testing has to be done before we get the complete results as it relates to the fire protection system. And when we talk about the fire protection system, it should be noted we're talking about both the sprinkler system, which runs under the garage area, as well as what many refer to as the standpipe system, which runs up through the structure of the Civic Center jail. As you all have received reports, Hampton Roads Regional Jail is finalizing its resolution as it pertains with the Department of Justice. And I will let the representative for the Hampton Roads Regional Jail speak in detail with regard to that. But I will just tell you that we have been notified that those issues are in final form and should be resolved shortly. One of the reasons, or the main reason for bringing this issue and presenting this issue to the City Council is the fact as it relates specifically to the civil rights of the residents of the Civic Center Jail. The law of Virginia and federal law speaks to the operations of jails and the addressing of capital needs. Many of you are aware, because you've been on council for a considerable period of time, when we talk about capital needs, we're talking about items of value $50,000 or more that involve construction or physical assets or the refurbishing of physical assets. Federal law identifies, as it relates to capital needs, the final authority for approving or developing and addressing capital needs. Federal law identifies the City Council as the individuals who deal with those issues surrounding capital needs. Why is that? In part because the capital budget is one, although it may be administered by the city manager and it may be in part developed by the city manager, it is an item for voting in terms of the City Council must vote on the capital budget.
So legislative matter.
It is a legislative matter in that respect. And in that same respect, the law identifies issues with regard to capital measures as being issues for the body, the legislative body, that can effectuate that policy in terms of actions, dollars, or issues. So where are we in the discussion of where are we? The city of Portsmouth, in order to make required repairs to the existing jail or to build a new jail, the City Council, as the legislative body in charge of capital projects, capital budgets, capital endeavors, would have to act before the budget is established to approve either a tax rate increase of 61 cents in a single year or some smaller number for multiple years in order to address the identified needs for repairs or the identified cost for new construction. Otherwise, City Council would have to act before the budget to establish and authorize a debt issuance of $31 to $47 million, which would place the city in violation of its debt policy and exceed its debt capacity.
Solomon,
Yes, ma'am.
we talk about violating our debt capacity. So who's going to slap our hand? We developed our own debt policy, so who's going to slap our hand about debt capacity?
There's a couple of issues. You certainly did pass a debt policy. You put that in place. You have borrowed money from the market in terms of bond issuances based on your existing debt policy capacity, asset, fund balance. First and foremost, the market will come back to you
That's where you get beat.
when you violate it.
You get your beaten in the market.
And your
And-
rating.
And I'm not going to profess to be the financial officer, but also that will affect your ability and your
Bond ratings down the road.
your bond ratings affect your ability to borrow and the rate at which you can borrow, which may affect the amount you could borrow in the future. And so a violation of the debt policy could essentially handcuff the city in some respects in terms of what it can do in the future.
Other projects.
Certainly, going forward. I wanted to present this slide just so everyone is fully aware, because I know there's been some discussion about what the order says and what the court's instructions were. I direct everybody to the last sentence here. In this case, the court directs the city of Portsmouth to maintain the Portsmouth City Jail in a manner that is secure and adequate for housing of inmates so long as the facility is used as a jail. And then it goes on to say the parties are further directed to discuss resolution of other pending matters. And so the city has and continues to address the needs and the repairs over at the Civic Center and specifically the jail as those issues come up. And so, but I wanted everyone to be aware of that as well as aware of some of the issues surrounding that particular order as things go forward. As a note, the city has filed a notice of appeal in order to preserve the city's rights as it relates to that particular order. So where do we go? I just addressed the first point. The city of Portsmouth, in order to protect its rights and in order to avoid the financial strain that will result from the current court opinion, must appeal the court opinions in order for it to be able to move forward without violating its policies or implementing double-digit tax increase. The city attorney's office has advocated and has asking you tonight to consider closing the jail effective August 15th, 2020. Why do we pick that particular date? Court testimony has been that it would take about 4 months to reasonably transition over to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. And so that's why you have a date of August 15th, 2020. And why do we talk about transferring all of the residents in the Civic Center to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail? In part, in summation, because utilizing the Hampton Roads Regional Jail is an opportunity to address the city's need with regard to incarceration without violating the city's debt policy. As you all know, you are one of, I believe, 5 members of the Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority. It is a shared responsibilities. The costs are also shared. Transferring residents to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail would not require the city to need to implement a double-digit tax rate increase for one single function of municipal government, just one single function. If you were not to do that, so that would be the next issue for the city council. It provides an opportunity and leaves council in a position where it can address other civic needs and operational needs if the tax increase is not necessary. And let me address that from some of the testimony that was given in the court case back in August. The CFO testified that if there were other issues, if the city were to try to address this issue by other means, we would be looking at cutting services. We would be looking at cutting CIP projects such as schools, fire stations, seawall repairs. Those are the capital projects that are on your current plan. And most importantly, from the city attorney's standpoint, it eliminates the liabilities associated with the Civic Center jail. As I have said, you all have been provided an opportunity to look at the 3 assessments that were made back earlier in the year that address the number of needs in that facility. And I will submit to you the only way you avoid the liabilities associated with those 3 reports is to move folks out of that particular facility. The position today and the considerations for council are not new ones for this city council. As you all are aware, there is a resolution teed up for tomorrow for your consideration, but these are not new considerations. The most recent consideration was August 14th of 2012. City Council passed a resolution, and in that resolution it found and determined that it is in the best interest of the city to demolish the Civic Center as soon as practically possible to do so. In that same resolution, City Council directed the city manager to develop options for relocating inmates from the present Portsmouth City Jail to another location or locations so that the entire Civic Center, including the jail, could be demolished. But most important in that resolution was an acknowledgement by the City Council of the realities on the ground as it relates to the Civic Center and the systems that run the Civic Center jail. City Council recognized the issues related to the operation of the Civic Center systems, where it acknowledged the operating systems of the Civic Center, including water, sanitary sewer, HVAC, electrical communications, and parking, are interconnected between the various structures, thus making it unfeasible to leave the present jail in place while demolishing the remainder of the Civic Center. And so with that, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council, we bring this presentation forward to you for both your benefit and the public's benefit in advance of the resolution that is proposed for tomorrow afternoon at the City Council meeting. And if it's your pleasure and your will, I can make this same presentation tomorrow during the City Council meeting.
Well, let's handle that first. Let's make this presentation without objection. And now we'll entertain questions. Questions?
Yes,
Lisa?
couple. I guess first question, this information has been presented to the judge and to the sheriff's attorney?
No.
Okay. And I guess the next court date is?
The 13th, Vice
Okay.
Mayor,
All
which
right,
is
so-
Friday.
Friday, okay. Let's see, the pending DOJ report, so we don't have that yet, so that's a concern for me, we don't have that yet. The court date is on the 13th. It would be my desire after, we're going to present it tomorrow, that we table the item until after the court date, till we hear from, whatever that outcome is supposed to be on the 13th. And I guess why was the jail left into such ill repair for 15 to 20 years? That's a question of mine. Were there regular inspections done to prevent the failures like the boiler that just went out on February 7th while we were in retreat? Looked like the date was February 7th. CIP, why wasn't this set in, years ago? This is just my 3rd year on council, but why wasn't some CIP funds set aside for a jail to be repaired or replaced, or just like we do with schools and just like we do with fire structures? And let's see, were any items on the sheriff's proposal? I know the sheriff had given a proposal to transition. Were any of those items considered?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, let me address one or two that I know I can address directly. With regard to the options for the Civic Center jail over long-term and capital issues. I will tell you that the resolutions of the City Council going back to Wayne Orton's tenure identified the Hampton Roads Regional Jail as being the option for moving the city jail. So that is the 91, 95 timeframe that discussion initially began by City Council to utilize the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. I can provide you the date, but in that discussion it talks about moving folks there at that period of time and adding beds to the regional jail for this particular purpose. So that addresses that piece of it. With regard to discussions with regard to the sheriff in terms of proposals, we can certainly go through those in terms of closed session, what those discussions have been in terms of back and forth. So I'll certainly address those. In terms of the repairs, I can tell you during my tenure, the boiler repairs, as I understand it, the boiler system has a, we call it SCADA. I call it SCADA. It has an automatic system that'll alert the city when it fails. It's my understanding that system went off, and that's why we addressed the boiler situation at that point in time, because we received a signal that the boiler had failed.
Can you go back to slide 20?
Sure.
This relates to what Lisa just brought up.
20.
It appears to me that the resolution that was adopted by the City Council in August of 2012 says we're not going to put any more money into repair. We want to bring it down. So I think they planted the flag right there.
But we're regular, like inspections, because in my business, if we don't inspect something every year, we get a citation. So I don't know how often the inspections were supposed to be done.
My understanding that the fire marshal inspections were done at whatever rate they were required. In terms of other inspections, I'm not sure. Well, let me back up. I can't say that. Fire inspections, I understand, were done on a regular basis. There were some Department of Correction inspections that the sheriff has spoken to that were done on a regular basis also, is my understanding. And I can only say that having heard the sheriff speak to those.
Paul?
Can you go back to the judge's order?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you read the first paragraph?
This cause came on January 9th for a hearing on city's demur to petition to show cause, the petition for injunction and declaratory relief, and the petition to show cause, and in consideration of arguments of counsel and evidence presented at the hearing on January 9, 2020, arguments of counsel and evidence presented at the hearing September 25, 2019, arguments of counsel and evidence presented at the hearing July 25, 2019, and the pleadings filed in the case. It is.
And that first order?
A judge ordered and decreed that the demur to the petition for injunction of relief and declaratory judgment argued is denied. It is further.
That's how it reads in its entirety.
You want me to read the entire thing?
No, just the first paragraph.
That's the first two paragraphs.
Okay, that's it in its entirety.
Yes, sir.
So, evidently, there's something that the judge wasn't comfortable with. Would we be violating the law if we decided to vote on closing the jail? Or maybe we need to go back to the judge and ask him to clarify, because we're in one paragraph, he's saying, leave the jail alone. And another paragraph, he's saying, as long as you operate it as a jail. So do you think we should go back to him and say, well, please clarify, because it is our intent, rather than to play the clever game?
Let me, without stepping over the ethical line in terms of attorney-client communication, let me just say, this order was a clarification. There was a initial order that was offered that was asked to be clarified, and this is the clarification, Councilman Bell.
I have a question. Are you finished?
Yes, sir, thank you.
You've indicated that there's federal case law that indicates that it is a legislative function to make a decision on capital projects.
Correct.
And capital projects that relate to a jail.
Correct.
So what we're faced with is not a judicial decision, but a legislative decision. Is that correct?
Correct.
Whether we make repairs to a building that would cost $42.6 million, if I did my math right, just following your presentation. I mean, that's the cost of a brand-new jail. But the way I understand what you are briefing us is that that's a decision that rests by law with us and not with the court or anybody else.
Correct.
Bill?
I think the major point is that we're paying for 250 bids. The sheriff's utilizing 35. There are 4 other members of the regional jail. And I think our sheriff has cited that he doesn't want to put prisoners there because he deems it not a safe environment. Is that a correct statement?
That's roughly his position, yes, sir.
Okay, the other 4 members, how many of those members have pulled inmates from the regional jail?
To my understanding, all of the other members are at, if not over capacity,
There
a
you
little
go.
over capacity.
Prime example. Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Mr. Ashby, tell me again, I know I've asked this a couple of languages. Who has the authority to determine what jail is operational in the city?
Councilwoman Simmons, we have, well, let me be clear, and let me not. Brown versus Mitchell, a federal court case involving the issues surrounding the Richmond City Jail, so you don't have to hold me only responsible for this, cites that the provision of the jail is the city's responsibility. And that is the same case that speaks to the capital needs, capital judgments, capital allocations as being the responsibility.
All of it comes back to the legislature.
Correct.
And that was the case that I was making reference to in my question.
One other question. The other 5 cities that are contracted with this Hampton Roads Regional Jail, how many of those cities have their own jail?
I want to say,
You could best answer that.
All of them. Because it's Hampton, Newport News, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and Portsmouth.
I think this is the only regional jail in the entire Commonwealth, though, where the members have individual jails. And I've been associated with several regional jails, and none of those members have a local
City
jail.
jail.
That includes Suffolk, too.
Suffolk,
Correct.
Greensville County, Emporia, Charlottesville.
They all use just their
Yeah,
regional.
and that's why you do a regional jail. It's more efficient, and you get more money from the state.
So
Paul?
you're saying that from the orders that the judge gave us, and if we decide to not follow those orders and close the jail, then there's no liability involved for the council.
let me, Councilman Battle, as opposed to delineating all of the council's liabilities in an open session, let me just point you to the precise language of the order. The city is ordered to maintain the Portsmouth City Jail
I
in the manner
understand that.
as long as it is operated as a jail
I
by the city.
understand that fully.
Okay.
But I'm asking you, what are the liability implications should we decide to?
You have liabilities if you leave that facility open.
No, that's not what I asked you.
Well, you're asking me about liabilities.
If we close you've already told me about if we
Okay.
leave it open.
Okay. So if you close it
Yes, sir.
and you move folks over to the Hampton Roads Regional
That's all
Jail,
I want to know, sir.
you reduce the liabilities associated with the reports
No.
at the city. You're asking about liabilities. Are you asking
Liability from that move only,
from what move? Tell me.
of condemning or closing the jail and not allowing it to be used as a storage place for our folk that have broke the law. That's all.
And
Narrow.
And let me say that.
Yes, sir.
Your potential liabilities from the residents of the Civic Center Jail diminish from those issues associated with where they're housed now.
Let me try it one more time.
Certainly.
What liability can we incur if we vote to close the jail?
You mean we?
I think you
Right.
mean,
We.
Right,
City
We, the
Council.
7 of
right,
us.
that's right.
You incur your normal liability for operating as the city council members. And so without a specifics, Councilman Battle, I'm trying to understand what you're
The city
saying.
attorney wouldn't recommend we break the law.
yeah,
What that language says, if you're going to use that as a jail,
it's got to be.
make it in good repair.
Correct.
You get to decide where the jail is going to be.
That's it.
In reference
The
to
court
the
doesn't.
order that was sent down, if we decide to close the jail, what liability would be associated with defying that particular order? So
And what I would tell you is you wouldn't defy it. I wouldn't tell you to defy a court order.
Well, that's all I'm asked you, so there's no liability involved.
Mr. Battle, I'll be quite frank with you. You can sue a ham sandwich in the United States of America, so I can't give you absolutes.
Well,
I can't give you
we're
absolutes.
dealing with the law, we need to be absolute.
Well, and I would submit to you that there are both challenges and liabilities on both sides. And so what I present to City Council is the best case scenario, given all of the parameters that have been here discussed. There are issues, certainly, before you. Let me, I would ask you to let us carry that conversation off in the closed session so I can
Yes, sir.
make you aware of a couple of other things also.
Thank you.
One last question. So what are we what is the outcome? What are we looking to get from the judge on the 13th? And why do we need to move with a resolution and a vote tomorrow as opposed to going to court on the 13th?
Let me put two things out there. I'm not sure what's going to happen on the 13th because there's a motion pending or filed to continue the hearing on the 13th. So that's a bit of a question. With regard to the pros and cons, it's the flip side of Councilman Battle's question, so I need to address that with you all in terms of closed session.
Let's look at it in the way of, we've got to spend money. We've got a court order that says if you're going to use the building next door as a jail,
Make it safe.
you got to make it safe.
Right.
To make it safe is $42.62 million. That's almost a new jail. So does it make sense for us to put It's like having a car that's built in 1972. Does it make sense in putting an amount into that car in repairs that's equal to buying a new car? Not to me. And then, okay, if the decision is to build a new jail, it flies in the face of our financial capacity to do so. And so the third alternative is an alternative that has been built with 50% state funding, that's operated with more state revenue coming to a regional jail than a local jail, that we already are committed to 250 bids, which has, from the report that the superintendent gave us last year, has capacity to take our prisoners plus another 200 prisoners. So that's the choice that's before us. How do we spend our money? Do we spend it in an old building at 42.6, or a new building that's close to 47, or one that we don't have to put up any capital cost because it's already built?
Well, I think that second paragraph, so long as the facility is used as a jail by the city, I think the judge is saying, keep it secure and adequate as long as you're going to use it as a jail. Well, what we're going to hopefully decide, that we're not going to use it as a jail any longer. We're going to utilize the facility that we're paying almost $6 million annually for.
And it's really a ratification of the action that the council took in August of 2012. Paul, you asked for the floor.
If we send the prisoners to the regional jail, and we know the history of the regional jail, and to my knowledge, everybody has their own opinion about the jail in reference to maintaining the health and safety of the consumers. If there are problems there that incur with the citizens in our city where liability is concerned, do we duck that liability by sending them there, or are we still responsible for the consumers we spend and the liability involved with it?
The frontline care and treatment for those individuals would be the authority. Again, Mr. Battle, and I'm not trying to be funny about this, the city gets lawsuits related to Hampton Roads Regional Jail inmates on a regular basis, but it's sort of perfunctory in terms of how that occurs.
But with the history of that jail, is this a good thing for us to do? That's what I'm saying. We might spend $40–50 million in liability, and I just want to keep us, out
Sure.
of that's all I'm trying to do.
Elizabeth?
Mr. Ashby, wouldn't it be true that we also get, the city, over the years, the city jail has been in existence, get perfunctory legal challenges from folks in that jail, but as a regional jail, probably everybody that's housed in the regional jail, no matter where they come from, might try to include the Portsmouth City Council only because the jail resides in Portsmouth.
That
So it
has
doesn't open
been
us up to anything any different than what any city government has with.
that has been the history with a number of lawsuits. Folks say it's sitting in Portsmouth, and so they tend to file. But what I would say in terms of, you have representation, you have statutory representation with regard to authority. There's this fine young lady who is right now the vice chair of the Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority, who sits across the table from each and every one of you. But you rotate responsibilities, I believe, annually in terms of that shared responsibility for all of the individuals over there. And so the city has a means of checking on and making sure its residents are okay in terms of the Regional Jail Authority. It's called representation both by the city as well as statutorily, the sheriff is to be a representative on that board.
I guess one last question, I guess now, when Hampton sends somebody, or Norfolk, or Chesapeake, or what's the last one, Newport News, and I mean, it's their person, that came to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, but if somebody, family member die and they sue the city, I mean, it's always Portsmouth that gets the blight on that, even though they came from Newport News or Chesapeake. I mean, how do we escape that?
That is again, the issue typically, and it's a media issue, as you said, many times it may be someone from another particular city. It is the location that really is driving that narrative.
Let me help. Typically, when you're the host city, you ask for some type of concession. For example, when SIPSA was created, the concession that Suffolk asked for the location of the landfill in Suffolk was that Suffolk had no tipping fee.
They were the host.
They were the host. And I remember the conversation very well when it went to the regional level, and Portsmouth says, well, how come Portsmouth gets to dump free? The response was that you can have no tipping fee if you want the landfill in Portsmouth. A concession was made to Portsmouth that they would have a reduced per diem fee as the host city. And so typically it's recognized at the point where these authorities come together that a concession is made in some fashion. It's negotiated at the time. And so what was negotiated at the time that this authority came together was that Portsmouth would have a reduced per diem fee. Its fee is lower than what the other jurisdictions pay.
But if a family member sues, who takes on the court case, and which city?
The authority does.
The authority.
Yeah.
The authority does.
But the citizens don't ever see it like that. They say another one died at the Hampton Roads Jail, and they go Portsmouth again. That's how it's always presented.
Paul?
So what if they sue the board and then they say, and who sent them over, and then sue us individually, and then sue the city? I mean, we can't, are we covered from that liability?
Yes.
That's what I'm asking you.
Yes. Typically when
There's no way they're gonna be able to come to this city and sue us for us sending them to a place with a history that wasn't quite as good as it should have been.
when a member of the city of Portsmouth is properly identified, associated with a regional jail authority lawsuit, the regional jail picks up the defense. Now, what I will also tell you is there are residents who file their own actions. And if you don't think I'm a good lawyer, I will tell you the residents aren't the best lawyers either. So they will do some scattershot type things. And if it's just a matter of a dismissal because they just are just dead wrong, sometimes my office does it because we can get it done quicker and cleaner as opposed to engaging and having a city council member tied up into something we have no business in. So sometimes my office does it quick and dirty to get a council member out of it. But if it is truly related to what's going on there, the authority provides the defense and the covers the cost.
Of the defense.
So, yes, sir.
What about of the liability?
Yes, sir.
That
When I
follows
talk cost, I mean the liability also.
Most authorities that are created in Virginia are styled as a political subdivision of the state. And that's special language. That means that they can be sued, and they can sue. They're like a municipal corporation, but not quite. A municipal corporation has a charter where the authorities have the statutory plus any agreements that undergird the statutory language that creates the authority. Any other discussion?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you'll make the same presentation tomorrow
Yes, sir.
At the 7 o'clock, Mayor.
at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
All right, we're at item 2.
Yes, we will have Ms. Gloria Washington, Budget Officer, to come forward with benchmarking fees and rates.
Something goes wrong.
Mayor Rose, Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, and members of City Council. Tonight, I will be presenting fee and rates benchmarking data, which is instrumental in decision-making for the upcoming FY 2021 budget process. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends best practices, which are included in the city's financial policies with reference to the development of revenues each budget year. They are noted on page 16-2 of the adopted FY 2020 budget document. The city will strive to maintain diversified and stable revenue streams to protect government from problematic fluctuations in any single revenue source. Staff annually review fees and rates with the development of the operating budget in order to recover all or a portion of the city's expense providing the service. Revenues will be budgeted conservatively to minimize shortfalls in individual revenue accounts. Staff develop revenue estimates based on historical collection patterns and economic trends. The areas noted above regarding current review of fees and rates are factors that are utilized during the budget process for the consideration of various rate and fee structures for the city. Again, this ensures that all criteria and data have been evaluated to ensure maximum cost recovery of services and minimizing costs to our citizens. Comparative tax rates for FY 2020. This chart compares major tax rates among our Hampton Roads peer cities: Chesapeake, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Hampton, and Newport News. Please note that the city of Portsmouth ranks highest at $1.30 per $100 for real estate and $5 per $100 for personal property taxes. Lodging and admission taxes are consistent with their variable flat rates as noted on the chart. Portsmouth ranks the second highest at $1.50 for machinery and tools, and Norfolk ranks the highest at $1.70. The real estate tax rate, for note, has not changed since FY 2016.
Since when?
2016.
It'll be 5 years.
5 years.
Virginia Beach only charged not even a penny.
Not even a penny. But their assessment base is a lot higher, so
Can't hide money, can you?
you can't hide one. Comparison of annual tax impact. This chart compares the major taxes and fees impacting our city and our neighboring localities for FY 2020. Even though Portsmouth has the highest real estate and personal property tax rate, our total tax impact based on comparable real estate places Portsmouth as one of the best cities in Hampton Roads, closely aligned with the city of Hampton.
We're actually lower.
We're lower than you.
Yeah. So if you look at Portsmouth, and this is the real estate, gas, utility, restaurant, and all of those taxes, even though our rate is higher, our comparable real estate is lower. So even though you have like Virginia Beach and Chesapeake and Suffolk that may have lower rates, when you look at all of our taxes for our citizens, our difference is we're the lowest, you're correct, and then Hampton's at $35.96. And I think the highest is Suffolk at the difference of $921.78.
Is that Suffolk water?
Also, a positive factor for the city is that taxes as a percentage of household income ranks well among our peers. So you'll see these are some of our median incomes. But for the taxes that Portsmouth citizens pay, we're at 7.9%. Hampton's at 7.5%. So we're comparable. We are actually below Newport News, below Norfolk, and Chesapeake's a little bit lower than us. Public utilities, rate and fee adjustment considerations. These are considerations that were presented to you as part of the council's annual retreat. The Director of Public Utilities, Ms. Erin Tremere, shared the impact of major infrastructure projects that must be addressed over the next 15 to 20 years. And these are some of the adjustment considerations that were noted, that we have to promote long-term financial planning for the department, alignment with the national AWWA, American Water Works Association regional rates, continuation of operational best practices, and current and future regulatory requirements. We are proposing at this time the annual recurring of the FY 2018, which is a recommended, and then an additional 3 to 4%. And also some existing fees for our fixed fees, so that, again, we can comply with infrastructure needs for the Public Utilities Water Department. And also there are some new fees for construction, inspection, and site plan review also. This funding, again, will align with national AWWA standard practices and be implementing a tiered structure providing sufficient funding for bond funding of critical CIP needs. Engineering fees are administrative fees, right-of-way, lane closures, land disturbance, site plan reviews, and other associated fees. These fees are to cover cost of services and address regulatory requirements. It is noted that no adjustments in these fees have been done in the past 5 years, and the general increase ranges from 5 to 20% for existing fees. Parking authority. These fee considerations are to align municipal parking fees to uniform hourly rates, to cover cost of services and reduce increased reliance of the general fund subsidy. And some of the comparisons that we look at, we've been lower than Norfolk at $1.50 an hour, and obviously Richmond at $4 per hour. The new fees would be evening, overnight, and weekend and special events. Right now, we don't charge for those events. Stormwater management. The Virginia Stormwater Management Program, this is to comply with permit compliance, resiliency efforts for sea level rise mitigation, design and construction for more flood mitigating infrastructure projects, and our comparisons of rates are mid-range among our peer cities. Parks, recreation, and tourism. This parking fee consideration for the boat trailer is to align fees comparable to peer cities. Comparison of regional fees shows that it varies from $5 per day to $20 per year for residents and $40 per year for non-residents, or $5 per day and $50 per year and $10 per year for seniors at our municipal boat ramps among our neighboring peer cities.
Dr. Pat?
Mayor, with this consideration, in order for this to be put in place, if it is so determined, then the boat dock master, which we have talked about Mr. Moody for years, would have to be located at City Park for checking the decals or such. And right now, we are estimating that about 30 to 35% of the boats that are being launched for people outside of Portsmouth. And it may be a little higher.
AG has your hand up.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, and I know in one of the meetings we discussed in the parking authority about some of the new freestanding, for example, at the courthouse, there's not individual meters, there's the kiosk where you pay for your parking.
Right.
Something like that, where there wouldn't have to be an employee there all the times, they could purchase their ticket, but then it could be spot checked either by our city security guards or police department, and that way it wouldn't have to be somebody 24 hours a day. And, some of the other places where I've been, Virginia Beach, it's one of the public boat ramps that's part of State Park there. Part of theirs is even a honesty box. And I know, but they do spot check it, and if you get caught, it's going to cost you more than what you would have paid in the first place. So,
Well, you can't launch a boat without a car or a vehicle, so,
Gotta pay the park.
I agree that same type of parking meter would facilitate not having
Someone
somebody there.
That's right. And Mr. Wright is somewhere, but in the upcoming consideration, and I think even
He's right behind
He's
you.
right behind
we're dealing with, what is that called? Oh, okay. Could you go forward a minute? I want to ask you, just for you to make a statement. We're calling them the boxes, but you know there's a name for what the automated
Yes, ma'am. The automated pay stations.
Right.
They
And
allow you
we're-
to pay by phone, credit card, a number of different ways.
And we're now looking to place some of those across,
Correct.
more across.
We're in the process of modernizing our garages and our pay equipment.
To pick up on what Nate just said, I mean, a lot of the national parks, the campgrounds, you have a little envelope. You put your money in the envelope, you put it into the tube, you tear off a portion of the flap,
And put it in.
put it on your dashboard.
We could do that.
If-
All right.
So everything from a computerized system to something that's really easy to.
Right. We'll get there. Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Okay, this concludes the presentation. Are there any other questions?
Nate?
well, I guess it's kind of a question. Back to page 3 about the comparative tax rates. And I know we had this discussion before in here, and, everybody looking, that we have the highest of $1.30, but we've also had a discussion where ours is the same for everybody in the entire city, but other cities have locations within their cities that pay a premium. So just looking at the numbers that, for all those cities, some people in those cities are paying higher than what it looks like they're paying.
They're in a district.
And that's, so they pay more. So that's one of the perceptions, that it looks like we're the highest, but not in all cases.
Right. It's like the mosquito control districts. There's no additional fee.
Or special taxing districts.
That's right. Thank you, Ms. We'll now have Mrs. Rosalind Oglesby to come forward with the meal tax.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council. We will take a closer look at the comparison of the local meal tax and the impact of increasing the meals tax rate if proposed as part of the FY 2021. The state of Virginia imposes its meals tax under the retail sales and use tax. The meals tax is a flat percentage imposed on the price of a prepared meal. For the most part, the general sales tax for the state is 5.3%, 4.3% for the state and 1% for the local. Certain areas are levied an additional regional tax. For regions with a transportation district like the Hampton Roads, we are assessed an additional 0.7%, bringing the state's total sales tax to 6%, 5% for the state, and 1% for local. This means that the combined state and local tax rate on prepared meals can range from 7% to 14%, depending on where the meal is purchased. On this frame, you see the regional comparisons for the meals taxes. For Portsmouth, Norfolk, and Suffolk, we each charge for our local meals tax 6.5%. When you calculate in the state percentage, it goes to 12.5% on a prepared meal. In Chesapeake and Virginia Beach, it is 5.5%. Taking into account the state's sales tax rate, it is 11.5% on a prepared meal. And then with Hampton and Newport News, they're at 7.5%, calculate in the state, and they're at 13.5%. So now let's compare this to a meal that is actually purchased in Portsmouth. The picture that you see up here as the backdrop is actually a meal that I purchase at least once a week from a local restaurant here in Portsmouth.
At least 2 or 3 times a week. That's her salad with salmon.
The base salad costs about $8.99. I add me a piece of salmon, blackened salmon, for $7, and then I want fresh avocado for another $1. So that brings my meal to $16.99 before the tax is applied. At the city's current tax and the state combined of 12.5%, I paid $2.12 for that salad for a total of $19.11. Now, if the city was to consider, as part of the FY 2021, to go up an additional 1%, you will see that my potential tax at 13.5% has now increased to $2.29, bringing my salad to $19.28 for a difference of 17 cents. And that concludes my presentation. Are there still on bubble gum?
Unfortunately, not everyone eats
Twice or 3 times a week for lunch.
not at all. I wish I did, actually. My problem with singling out an industry like the restaurant industry is a couple of factors. One, tunnel tolls. We've been talking ever since the tolls were put on our tunnels, the stress that is putting the restaurant and hospitality industry under. Restaurateurs in this city aren't making a windfall, believe me, since those tolls were instituted. And the other thing that you got to keep in mind, patrons tip the wait staff. And the higher that meal tax goes up, the less gratuity one of those employees will get. And the other thing is, we have restaurateurs, unfortunately, that even though the money they collect on meal tax isn't theirs, we have restaurateurs that are behind on meal tax. So I think that just puts unneeded stress on the industry. If we're looking to use some of this 1% increase for schools, well, we get 1% back from the state. So let's not put that burden on the industry. Let's ante up if we must, which I think we have a funding formula that with potential of a casino being built in this city, I think school system would be foolish not to go with that funding formula on what it could amount to in the next 4 or 5 years. But let's not single out an industry to tax. I'm opposed to it.
Elizabeth?
I'm going to agree with Bill, and on top of that, with the last 2 years of no concerts in the region, our restaurants have lost a lot of business that they counted on. I wouldn't support it now. I don't support meals tax for schools. I think that's a strange combination, frankly. This is one of those, let's get the pavilion up and running and have a season and see how that goes and let our restaurants kind of get back on their feet. And I'm not saying I would come back and look at it next year, but I wouldn't support it this year.
I wouldn't support it either.
And Nate and I brought that up because we are the liaisons for education, and everybody know I've been taking some pretty hard hits for the vote that we had taken last week in not delaying the vote for an additional 2 weeks. And hindsight is always 20/20. 2 weeks probably wouldn't have killed a mockingbird, but my passion was for the formula because I believe that is a good formula. But if we don't do this meal tax, which I believe that we could have, we could match our cities that are similar to us on the other chart that Ms. Gloria Washington presented. We seem to be aligned with the Newport News on some. So I would have supported a 1% increase. But I'm saying if we don't do this meal tax and that if there is a shortfall in the school's budget, I would want to find it someplace else. If it's already factored in with Mr. Billy Butt's presentation on the differences that were shown in the real estate that was not accounted for in the funding formula. If we have a shortfall, if we don't find it in this meal tax, I'm going to advocate for us to find that someplace else.
When you apply that funding formula that we adopted to the Billy's new numbers, what's I would imagine that's a considerable increase.
We're good. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to say a number, but we're good with Mr. Holt's report and what we had proposed before we heard his report.
Good.
Okay.
Well,
So we brought this forward because we were asked to bring it forward.
Sure.
Last year, we discussed it, and so you've shared with us where you are, so we're good. We can move on. Good.
Well, I mean, there may be others that want it.
Well, the discussion came last year. We were trying to find a way last year to help the schools out.
Right, we did.
And this is just a revisit from last year. And, I thought it was a good idea, and some of that was based on other localities within this state where it has been extremely successful, and it didn't harm the business owners at all. But the last discussion we had about it, Lisa and I, we discussed it with our liaisons on the school board, and after the funding formula, anything like this, to me, needs to come as a resolution from them to us. So at this point in time, unless they come up, that's where the funding formula was, whether it was they really needed extra funding to support them doing a resolution for any type of tax increase, I think this would fall into that. So unless they vote for something and come up with a specific need, I'm fine to just let it be for the time being.
Can we have a consensus just not to slam the door on this during this discussion, but to keep it on the table as a matter to discuss as we get further into the budget process? And who knows, someone may come forward with that resolution that you're talking about. I had a negative position on it last year. I'm willing to keep an open mind on it this year. Each could challenge each other on how many times you eat out. I can tell you the Rose eat out an awful lot. Let's go rescue a restaurant downtown. And I think can you go back to that 17 cents?
17 cents.
I have 17 cent increase, bringing up
Yeah, I understand the argument from the restaurant folks. I understand nobody's worked we've all worked hard on the tunnels. We've had meetings with the governor and the Secretary of Transportation and the Secretary of Finance, and those discussions continue. The most recent was a discussion with the Secretary and the Highway Commissioner about buying the darn thing. It's for sale.
But that's not putting any money in the coffers of our restaurateurs.
People will eat.
And, but 17 cents I would bet would not keep a lot of people away on a.
But that's a salad. You cannot, I appreciate Roz's salad. But when you go out, you and your family go out to eat on a Friday night or a Saturday night, I guarantee you're going to spend more than $19. So that, I appreciate the 17 cent, but that's not a fair comparison.
But triple, or double that. Double the bottom line. Make it, for easy math, make it $34.
$2.50.
Then it's 34 cents.
Yeah.
If I did the math right.
But see, I would be more willing to support a meals tax increase if it was dedicated revenue for, like with hotel taxes towards tourism.
Get more people.
If it would get more people on the street again.
The meals tax.
Well, I think we had a consensus not to slam the door, but just lay it on the table. And thank you for the presentation,
Okay,
Dr. Pat.
all right. You want me to move
Good
on,
job.
Mayor?
Yes.
All right, now we will have the capital improvement program highlights. Mr. Traber, budget officer, will come forward.
I get an earful of it.
Guarantee it.
Oh, you sent it to me? You sent an email or text?
All right. Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, and members of City Council. Tonight, I will highlight the FY 2021 through 2025 Capital Improvement Program, its program areas, evaluation criteria, priority projects, and ongoing projects contained in the General Fund and Enterprise Fund capital budgets. The Capital Improvement Program, also known as CIP, is a 5-year plan that addresses the procurement and construction of capital assets, as well as ongoing replenishment and replacement of city infrastructure. The CIP's first year is the only appropriated year. Subsequent years provide a plan for addressing future infrastructure needs with projected resources and expenditures. The CIP is programmed into 9 specific areas that encompass every component of the Capital Improvement Program. The program areas are consistent with standard Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, practices and are similar to cities and counties throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Capital planning is critical to water, sewer, transportation, sanitation, and other essential public services. It is also an important component of a community's economic development program and strategic plan. The CIP development team reviewed and examined existing and future capital projects which align with the City Council's adopted vision principles and city's financial policies. These criteria include legal mandates, operating budget impact, and other considerations as listed above. At its annual retreat, City Council identified the following projects as priorities for the FY 2021-2025 Capital Improvements Plan. While not new, staff will reorganize current capital budgets to feature these projects and shorten the planning, design, construction timelines by working with qualified contractors already on its annual services list. This will enable a shorter approval process. These priority projects are Sportsplex building renovations, City Parks facilities upgrades, Portsmouth Arts and Cultural Center renovations, and 206 High Street renovations. The specific...
Hold on, if you could, just, Mayor, just so you all can see and nod your head, these are from the retreat. These are the ones that you wanted to be priorities in the CIP. And this is the report back of what we're proposing.
Thank you for the start of the elevator repair at the Art and Cultural
Yes,
Center.
and we're praying that every part that's there, they don't find another part that needs to be fabricated. So they're moving forward. Go on, Mr.
All right.
I had a report on it today.
All right. These specific general fund projects are currently ongoing. The Churchland Bridge, Seawall, Atlantic Union Bank Pavilion, upgrades, the city fiber network, rail to trail, and new fire station.
The work that's being done right now, you know, I had someone to ask, well, I don't see anything being done. But if what they're doing, they're bowing the holes. If you looked at the one today, you saw men down on the ground in the area where the seats go. They're bowing the holes for the seats because the seats will have to be fixed to the concrete. So we're still on target for the seats to get in and all that to be finished by the end of March.
Go ahead, Bill.
No. Okay.
You're dancing.
I was going to ask if Mr. McDonald is still getting periodic updates.
Yes, and there were
Progress.
3 acts, I'm calling them acts, but 3 performances released today through I Am Going and Mr. Pace working with it. Yes. So
I
there,
thought you were going to do that. I mean, no, follow up on that one. Mine's different. While we're on this slide, what's the status of the Churchland Bridge replacement? Can we get a quick oral
yes,
update
quickly.
on that? And the new fire station after
That was my question.
Yeah.
For Churchland Bridge, good afternoon, Mayor. Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Council. Churchland Bridge replacement, we have a pre-construction meeting Thursday morning. This Thursday morning. New fire station, we have a 30% design review this Thursday afternoon.
While we're on the fire station, it's been discussed with us in the public meetings about replacing or moving the skateboard park. Is that something that you're looking at?
Well, yeah, Mr. Wright will speak to it.
Yeah, that would be part of the design. That'll be the first step once we get to that point. Right now, the focus is what the station's going to look like. Once we set the 30% design, then we'll move forward in the final design, and we'll start coordinating the skate park removal.
Oh, so you think that the park and the station can be co-located?
No.
No.
No, the initial focus is the station.
Right.
Getting to the 30% design. Once we get to that and confirm that, we'll kick off into the full design to get to the final design product to bid that out. At that point, we'll also start looking at relocation of skate park.
Maybe at City Park or
Oh, well, we're going to be doing all of that, so that's a consideration.
There's already a skate park.
Somebody mentioned Paradise Creek.
As a speaker, citizens spoke to that last week, at last meeting. That's it.
You might want to have a conversation, if it's agreeable,
Mayfield.
with Mayfield.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Question,
Ross.
well, since we're talking about the skate park, would it be feasible or would it be too costly to have it in different places, like at the Paradise Creek and then maybe at the Sportsplex?
Well,
and then
tomorrow
someplace
night, you all
else?
are going to hear the CDBG presentation and the home presentation. And in that presentation, we'll be talking about an allocation for parks, where we got City Park and other parks. So you'll see that tomorrow night with some money identified from the federal government.
While we're talking about Craddock, 45 Afton,
Mr. Wright, what's the status of them getting that down?
They're waiting on the final 2 disconnect ladders.
The what?
Disconnect ladders.
And they come from who?
The utilities. So you get one from public utilities, one from gas, one from power, one from Cox, or whoever else is there. You can't get your permit to do the demo until you have all your disconnect notices.
so a general idea when that would be coming down is?
As soon as they get disconnect notices, it comes down within a week. It's not a very big building, but sometimes you have certain issues with certain utilities verifying that the services are no longer active, even though no one's been in the building for a while.
Okay.
So it's on there to come down.
Well, let's go through the whole list.
Not much left.
We got a city fiber.
City Fiber Network.
I was going to see, well,
You want to give a little update on that?
Mr. Burke said, just have a seat.
It's been
Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. The network is progressing at a higher speed now. We've got some good weather coming ahead, and they're bringing more drill crews into the area, so they'll be progressing now. They're on what we refer to as phase 2 and 3, which is the George Washington, McLean, Greenwood, TCC area. So that's where they'll be, as well as Court Street in downtown. So they'll be progressing further, maybe even getting ahead of our timeline, depending upon the weather.
Would it be unfair to ask for you to give a percent completed today?
A couple weeks ago, we were at 33. I'd probably say we're closer to 35, 36%.
And just a question, is it customary now that I finish my before you know before you go or whatever quiz today, but people are starting to call, like third-party people, and saying that there's some fiber spools out and we can come and install fiber at your location?
Don't do it.
Don't do it. No, I don't know. No, I don't know you, and I don't know who you are, but no.
No.
Are they calling or sending information?
No, they're calling.
Oh, I was going to say, if they're sending information, we could send it to Mr. Jones and he can advise.
I got a call.
Okay.
I mean, I know there is companies coming into the area, just because of what is happening in Virginia Beach, what we're doing, we're putting some pressure on. But still, I would want some more information rather than just
I told them
a
no.
cold call.
I told them I was on the committee.
Did we complete the Cavalier Manor complex yet?
Today.
What in the Cavalier Manor?
The work that we
Oh,
were
you're talking about the
doing.
baseball fields and all of that?
Yes, ma'am.
The fields are complete. The concession area and bathrooms, they're going through their final pieces before we can do the final inspection. That should be complete this week.
And that will
The
be
This
punch
month.
list, they be done.
for the upcoming season.
Right. Well, the field and all that have been ready. This is just the bathrooms. That's the only piece, the concession stand,
Thank
correct?
you.
Want to get some hot dog?
All right. Mr.
Slide around.
Welcome back.
Went for a walk, made a couple calls. All right. All right. The following enterprise fund projects are ongoing: sanitary sewer overflow elimination program, low pressure transmission mains, SCADA upgrades, downtown master utility replacement program, and then stormwater drainage facilities repair and lake management. Accepting the downtown master utility replacement program, all are perpetual projects, meaning that the work is related to maintaining the health of the system, and it does not necessarily have like an end date. We just kind of keep going, keep repairing the system.
Any questions? Mrs. Tremere is here if you need. Okay, Mr. Tremere.
Say that.
Here she
She's going to come to the lectern.
She's
Okay,
coming.
go ahead and get it.
So in the downtown master utility project, we're going to finally bid out the last phase that way.
We have Phase 2B is completed and ready for bid. We're just waiting on the final budget so that we know.
That's a part that
Available
goes
funding.
into the residential part of Old
Right,
Town.
it's from Court to
To Crawford.
Dinwiddie or
Oh,
Washington.
okay. All the
And
way
then-
over to the
Right,
river.
and then there's 2 more phases after that. Yep.
Thank you.
And just refresh my memory on the SCADA upgrades.
So that is upgrading. We're starting at Lake Kilby as part of our filter project. We'll do some upgrades for that, and then this goes out to distribution of our water system and also upgrades of all of our pump stations. The last time the SCADA systems were upgraded, it's been at least 20 years. We've got a 5-year plan to put that together.
Ms. Tremere, for the benefit of the public, what does the SCADA system provide in terms of information for you?
So at Lake Kilby, it provides us real-time information on flow, pressures, chemical dosing, a huge series of information that we need to report for regulatory purposes. The system that we're upgrading to now not only gives us that information, we're doing predictive, so we can see a problem before it occurs. We've got about 6 minutes out at Lake Kilby from the time an issue occurs to the time it gets out of our gate and becomes an issue in distribution. Same with our sanitary sewer pump stations. We're upgrading right now so that we have visual remote access to see what the pressures and the flows are. Right now, we're working off radio that is somewhat unreliable and dated. And then once we get to that where we can visually see things, we'll start looking at the control capabilities. But right now, we're just looking at data access for our sanitary sewer pump stations.
You may not be able to answer this question now, but I think it would be useful to know. What is the difference between the amount of water that flows through the master meter at the plant and what we bill for? In other words, how much loss do we have in the system from Suffolk to here? Is it 5%, 8%?
No, it's
10%?
about, I want to say, in the 7 to 9% range. It's a number that's a bit challenging to calculate completely accurately because what we bill is a different number than the revenue that we receive. We produce about, on average, about 17.5 million gallons a day out of Lake Kilby. So we've got, for a system our age, relatively low losses in our system.
I think it would be good information to have for us to, as we look at rates, to understand what that number is and how it's benchmarked against, let's say, Norfolk and Newport News and just pick Richmond, urban cities.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem.
Going to open up an MC business after this. Let me know. All right.
Okay.
This slide presents the funding sources for the current year CIP and preliminary FY 2021 to 2025 CIP. This underscores the work our city manager has done to restructure the CIP to fit the city's fund balance needs, maintain the city's bond rating, and work within debt affordability. Her work has decreased the 5-year CIP while meeting the needs of its citizens and city council priorities.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you.
Dr. Matt,
Mayor, this completes the presentations for tonight.
we have a need for a closed session. Is there a motion? Woo.
I move to go into closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711, 8.7, for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the city, specifically regarding Michael A. Moore versus City of Portsmouth, Portsmouth Circuit Court case numbers 19003403, 19003277, and 1900448811.
Any discussion on this motion that's been duly made and seconded? Hearing none, we're ready for a roll call vote, and will you call the vote, please?
Mr. Battle?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Whoever is absent. Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Mayor Rowe?
Yes. We're in closed session.